Hello, my name is Tyler, and today I will be presenting on nickel plating. First, let me introduce to you the concept of nickel plating, which is also referred to as nickel electroplating or electroless nickel plating. So, nickel plating is defined as the process of depositing nickel onto a metal part or surface. The specific reason I'm doing this project is to protect the battery terminals from corrosion, wear, and heat. But there are also many other reasons that you would nickel plate something, such as to add hardness to it, to add lubricity, and even to add magnetism to a metal surface. In order to complete a nickel plating process, you need a few things. First, you need vinegar. Any kind of white vinegar will do. You need salt. A fine salt would work well. You need wires with alligator clips, a plastic container, which is seen throughout the presentation, a power source. I used a charger because it's more efficient for multiple experiments, but if you're going to do this just once, you can use a battery, a charger adapter, which again, you will only need this if you're using a charger, and if you are using a charger, you will need two pieces of metal to stick into the ends and screw down so that you can clip the wires to that. Next, you will need two pieces of solid nickel, which is pretty obvious. You need an item or items to be plated, in order to complete a nickel plating process, you need a few things. First, you need vinegar. Any kind of white vinegar will do. So you may be wondering how I stumbled upon this idea to do nickel plating for my project. So the reason why is I constantly work with electronics, specifically video game consoles. This console that I was working on, it was a Game Boy, and it has these battery terminals in it which were badly corroded, and so I threw the terminals into rust remover, which removes corrosion but also removes the nickel plating that was currently on the terminals. So I decided that I'd like to replate them so that they would be further protected from corrosion in the future. I also wanted to learn this concept so I could apply it to future projects. Obviously not just Game Boys use battery terminals, a lot of video games and even just devices that are used in everyday life use battery terminals, and so if something gets corroded, I know how to fix it, and I can also replate it to prevent corrosion for future use. So this is a relatively easy experiment to do, and I'll explain the process to you. So the first thing you want to do is to fill a plastic container with the vinegar that you have. Not too much, but enough to fill the container about halfway is alright. Next, you want to attach the leads of the wires to the battery or the charger that you have, and then connect them to the nickel pieces and put them into the vinegar solution. Next, you want to add the salt to the solution and mix it until it's dissolved, and I'll explain in the next slide why you need the salt. Next, you want to wait for around 3 to 7 hours. Mine took about 7.5 hours for it to be what I considered ready to go, but depending on the size of the pieces of nickel and the amount of salt you add to the solution, it can take less time. So next, when the solution is a deep blue-green color, you want to disconnect the negative wire from the nickel, which is important. Again, will be explained in the next slide, but you need to disconnect the negative wire, or else the experiment will be ruined when you connect the item to be plated. So after you've disconnected the negative wire from the piece of nickel, you want to attach the item to be plated to the negative wire and then put it into the nickel solution, and you can hold it and swirl it around for around 15 seconds depending on the size of the item that you're plating. And then once you take it out, you want to make sure you reconnect the wire in a different spot so that the whole item is plated and not just part of it, and because if there is a mark where the wire was, it's not going to look as good. So once you do that, just set it out to dry, and that's it. That's the whole process. So here you can see the pictures of some of the initial setup and the solution after around 7.5 hours. So the wires, as I said earlier, you need to have 2 pieces of metal connected in the charger adapter, and then you want to connect your positive and negative to that. So then the picture in the middle is the initial setup with the nickel in the vinegar. That's before the salt is added. But then right after that I had added the salt. And then this last picture on the farthest to the right is what the solution will look like when you feel it is done. But this is the color that you're looking for. Once it looks like this, you know you're pretty much ready to go. Up till now, I have described to you the materials needed to do nickel plating as well as the concept behind it, but I have not yet described the chemistry behind it. So let's get started. First, vinegar is an electrolyte, which means it has electrically charged ions, which is why we're using it as the base for our nickel solution. But since it is an electrolyte, you can also use another solution that is also an electrolyte. It doesn't have to be vinegar if you don't have access to it. But vinegar is a very common liquid, so it's very easy to get your hands on and use for that. So when a charge is introduced to the nickel pieces, and just by the way, the piece with the red wire is negative and the green wire is positive. You'll see these in the next 2 pictures and the video. So then once the charge is introduced, the ions in the vinegar migrate to the metal with the opposite charge. Then the salt, you may be wondering why you need to use salt. That is used to increase the conductivity of the solution, which increases the speed of the reaction. So then once you add the salt, the positively charged nickel 2+ ions will be attracted to the negative charge of the nickel when connected to the negative wire, which will then deposit the metal to the surface of whatever is attached to the wire, which in my case is the battery terminal. So once all the ions are introduced, then it will be deposited onto the battery terminal. So here are some videos of what it looks like. The video on the left is the initial reaction on the negative piece of nickel. This one you will see a lot of bubbling and you will hear fizzing and you can smell the vinegar. So here are some videos of what it looks like. The video on the left is the initial reaction on the negative piece of nickel. This one you will see a lot of bubbling and you will hear fizzing and you can smell the vinegar. On the positive piece, there's not as much happening, which is why I don't have a video of it. There's very small amounts of bubbles, but no fizzing or anything like that. You can't hear anything. Now, the video to the right is a depiction of. So shown here are some results of the plating experiment. On the left, you will see the battery terminals before they were plated. You can see brownish red spots, which are not good, and on the right, you can see the brownish red spots are gone. You can see that they're shiny and silver colored, which means that I can confidently say that this experiment was a success and the nickel plating went exactly how it should have. This is the end of my presentation. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope that you learned something new, and I hope that you try nickel plating. I know that I very much enjoyed this process, and I learned a lot. And yeah, overall, it was just a very enjoyable experience for me.